And now, come with AMP on a trip into the not-too-distant future.
This week, test driving a Thompson tank, feeling at home with a computer, and saving India's art treasures.
Hello again, and welcome to the show. Also this week, we test drive an American dream car with the shape of a cruising shark and the visibility of a hovering helicopter. Jeff gets sucked into the world of leeches and their applications in microsurgery. But first, with Ian, the train of the future. All aboard, please.
This building, not far from the small town of Lauten in northwestern Germany, houses a vehicle that is destined to revolutionize high-speed ground transportation on this planet. It's been under development for some time in Germany, and several other countries, the United States, Canada, Japan, and Britain, have produced experimental prototypes. But this German vehicle is far, far more advanced than any other. To describe it in its most simplest terms, it is a train without wheels, a train which flies. It flies magnetically suspended above its tracks at up to 400 kilometers or 250 miles an hour. The project is a joint venture involving 7 major West German companies, including the industrial giants Messerschmitt Bolkau Blum, Krauss Maffei, and Thyssen Henschel, as well as the West German government, who've all formed the Transrapid Consortium. The revolutionary train is designed primarily to meet the growing worldwide demand for modern, high-speed intercity ground transportation, filling the gap between advanced wheel-on-rail systems and air transport, more economically and efficiently than any other means of transportation. The basic concept behind the process used in the Transrapid train is a contact-free levitation, guidance, and propulsion system. The first two, levitation and guidance, are achieved with 2 different kinds of magnetic forces induced by powerful magnets. One set is under the structure so that when they are attracted towards the guidance rail, they literally raise the vehicle. The second set is a series of guidance magnets, which provide a horizontal force that prevents swaying and repels lateral forces on curves. Well, these are the levitation magnets, and there are 32 of those along the underside of each carriage, 16 on each side. The guidance magnets are in here, and there are 28 of those with each carriage, 14 on each side. So we've seen the levitation and the guidance systems. Now the propulsion system, which can be compared to an electric motor. In an electric motor, when power is applied, magnetic forces generated in the stator cause the reaction part, or the rotor, to turn. Now, if you rolled the stator out and also flattened the rotor, the magnetic forces still make it move, but now it moves continually on a flat plane. The specially built 30-kilometer or 20-mile test track at Emsland on the Dutch border has seen more than 1,000 test runs of the Transrapid train, the first large-scale magnetic levitation trials in history. While the test program will probably continue until 1989, it's already shown that the vehicle is capable of accelerating smoothly and quietly to its top speed within 2 minutes, of climbing gradients as steep as 10%, which is significantly greater than a wheel-on-rail vehicle, and of negotiating much tighter curves at speeds of 250 kilometers or 150 miles an hour than would be possible in a train with wheels. Each test run is closely monitored from the fully computerized control room, which shows here a unique feature of the maglev system, in which only a maximum of 3 kilometers or 2 miles of the track is activated at any one time. In other words, power is only running through that section of the track on which the train is travelling. Well, the whole idea of the magnetic levitation concept is to compete with the airlines, conventional railways, and the automobile in several areas, in safety, comfort, and in the frequency of service. But most importantly, in the actual travel time from door to door. Averaging around 320 kilometres or 200 miles an hour, it can provide faster transportation than a plane over distances of up to 800 kilometres or 500 miles. In addition, it's environmentally sound. It uses less power, far less ground space than conventional railways or superhighways, and it's virtually pollution-free. And because of its frictionless operation, the only noise, even at maximum speeds, is that of the wind. The Transrapid Consortium has already drawn up plans for potential high-speed magnetic levitation corridors throughout Europe, several areas in North America, and Australia. One of the first is likely to be the busy and lucrative 250-mile or 400-kilometre run between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. The Transrapid will cut that time in half. The stunning success of the maglev trials here in North Germany have set the stage for what could be a number of substantial international sales for the Transrapid Consortium. One of the things I find most interesting about the whole program, though, is that one of the major sponsors of this very expensive project is Lufthansa, the West German airline. Perhaps they've seen some writing on the wall.
Coming up next, taming the Wildcat 4.
This is the Buick Wildcat. It's a slightly fanciful phaeton that does have some of the characteristics of its feline namesake, crouching, muscular, and very swift. For car companies, predicting the future is a deadly serious business. If the crystal ball is a bit cloudy, you end up with a lot of surplus cars on the lot. If the designers of the Buick have got it right, by 1995, car doors, as we've known them, are a thing of the past. Well, it looks a bit like George Jetson's Commuter, but it's also an example of how sometimes the designer's dreams and doodles can be turned into reality, at some considerable cost, I might add. But then Buick and the specialist glass and paint manufacturer PPG have certainly got an interesting car for their risk capital. An exposed al fresco style engine, four-wheel drive, computer-driven instrument array, and a striking body shape that makes it look like it's going backwards when it's actually going forwards. Well, with the canopy in the up position, the steering wheel and the steering hub are swung away hydraulically to give you a bit more access because there's really not a lot of room inside here. Inside the steering hub is a whole set of instrumentation which are driven by computers, and we'll activate now all the computers on board via this radio frequency beeper. And that's all the computers being fired up and the cooling system in front. Now, I can see the rev counter, the temperature of the car, the battery level, and up in front I can also see via a periscope mirror system a heads-up display which does work, and that shows me my gear settings and the speed. And I can also activate over here a whole series of computerized graphics from the tyre pressure to the voltage levels at the spark plugs. But there's also something of a spoil sport software in the computer, because I'm told that at 120 kilometers an hour the fuel is blocked off to the engine, presumably to stop exuberant drivers like myself from getting carried away. Let's take it for a drive. Although a lot of effort has gone into the futuristic cabin and instrumentation, one of the key design elements was the concept of having an exposed engine. Reminiscent of a hot rod cafe racer, with slightly more refinement. The 3.8 litre V6 double overhead cam 24-valve power plant develops 230 horsepower, so it's quite worthy of showcasing. The pillarless canopy makes you feel like you're inside a water bubble. With no blind spots, it's great for defensive driving. But the expansive window, made from acrylic, carbon fibre and glass-reinforced polyester resin, still has a few defects. It's quite a panoramic view from inside the capsule. It really is like a capsule. But the optics of the glass is still got quite a deal of distortion in it. What's interesting is that when designers ponder the shapes of future cars, it's the glass technologies that are the limiting factor. There'll no doubt be a tendency towards low-slung, high window area vehicles, but to achieve that sweep of glass without optical defects is a real challenge. The Wildcat's canopy was cast 7 times to achieve this level of clarity. At the moment, if you leave the Wildcat stationary in the sun, it gets really hot inside. Work is going on to include in the glass solar cell arrays that would drive the air conditioning while it's parked. Also, special reactive tints for the glass that would respond to ultraviolet light, just like my optical eyewear. Stylists at Buick and General Motors have had a long-time love affair with trying to make you feel like you're inside a jet fighter. So it's worth looking back to see the origins of the latest Wildcat. And just like its ancestors, the Wildcat is not entirely practical. The steering hub gauges, although they're technically quite superb, are not in line of sight for driving. And who knows when you'd need a G-meter for cornering. But then dream cars don't have to be practical. They need only to be cerebral, evocative and controversial. But then that's the way it is in the concept car business. Ultimately, all is forgiven, except the failure to dream.
This unusually brave young man is Steve Sutton. He's allowing himself to be bitten by the wolves of the worm world, leeches. It's enough to give anyone the horrors. Not only that, but the heat from our lights is making the little suckers unusually active. They're quite keen to escape, aren't they?
Oh, yes,
Can they survive away from the tank?
We do put foam rubber slabs down which we soak in water, and if they get to those, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
But if they climb up the walls or if they get to the side there, then they'll just get desiccated within 4 hours, 5 hours.
So they have to be kept wet usually?
Very damp, yeah. Yeah.
Some of them seem more active than others and they're swimming around. Are those the hungrier of the group?
Yeah, the hungrier leeches are the leeches that are swimming. They sense the vibration in the water and they will swim towards the vibration.
I noticed that quite a large amount of them have kind of gathered on your side of the tank. Is that the heat from your body that's drawing them over there?
That's right, yeah.
And they can feel that through the fiberglass container?
Very sensitive to temperature changes. Very
That's
sensitive.
extraordinary, isn't it?
It is fantastic, yeah.
And on my side?
Yeah.
Just a few?
Yeah.
But if your attention span is, well, dropping off, take heed. These repulsive but astonishingly clever little creatures are making a comeback in medical science. Doctors, in fact, are clinging to the belief that leeches can help us all. Leeches, of course, have been around for centuries. In Europe, women were paid to collect them from ponds, and bleeding was considered the cure for many ills, from gout to heart disease. This is, in fact, the world's only leech farm. 30,000 of these little horrors live in semi-darkness in large tanks. The rooms are kept cool, so they're less active. At least, they weren't active until we arrived. Well, he's just bitten me, and I'll bleed from that wound for quite a while, because in his saliva, there's an anticoagulant which stops the blood, effectively, from clotting. And that's why these leeches are so effective in modern microsurgery. particularly in the reconnection of severed limbs and fingers, where you don't want things to bleed too much. Sucker. Me, that is. We've all at some time or other encountered leeches in ponds. The reason you never realise they've bitten you is the local anaesthetic in their spit, which prevents the host feeling any pain, and a vasodilator, which increases the availability of blood for the leech. And what do you feed leeches on? Well, blood, of course. This, possibly the most disgusting sequence ever filmed for Beyond 2000, shows how a blood sausage is made using bull's blood from an abattoir and a thin sausage membrane. Okay, boys, go for it. Oh, yummo. 9 different products can be extracted from the common or garden medicinal leech. And this jumbo-sized Amazonian can produce a substance called hementin, which can break down blood clots. The export of leeches for medical use has turned into a big business for Dr. Roy Sawyer, an American now resident in Wales. They've been used to treat anything from glaucoma to severed ears. They're great for getting the circulation going again.
I think it's very clear that this type of work that we've embarked on will continue beyond my lifetime.
How would you describe your own relationship with leeches?
Quite a deep relationship. I think there's a commitment to the understanding of the animal.
Another consignment of leeches is packed in its cardboard container to make a journey to a hospital in London. BioPharm, Roy Sawyer's company, is now exporting leeches all over the world. The medicinal leeches go for about $4 each, the Amazonian ones as much as $160. But back at the leech farm, your reporter was making good his escape, hopefully having made no new attachments, if you get my meaning.
After the break, the big shots play video games.
Southern France, where the French army learns to drive its tanks. Maneuvering an enormous beast like this, an AMX-30 Roland tank, when it's fully laden with weapons and with soldiers, is an extremely time-consuming task to learn. It's also one of the most expensive undertakings for any army around the world, both in time and in wear and tear on the equipment. And while there's no substitute for the real training like this, the French army can now learn to drive a tank without even coming outdoors. The latest school of tank driving, a 1 to 300 scale model of some of the roughest terrain ever likely to be experienced by a tank driver anywhere in the world. This beautifully detailed maquette is brought to life by a periscopic camera suspended from a frame which traverses the landscape, allowing the camera to pan and track in any direction. The model takes the tank driver down steep ravines, across swamps, across fallen logs, through villages and towns, and through forests. About the only thing it can't do is take the tank driver under a bridge. For the a young soldier, this is a deadly serious training program. It's fast, too. Just 15 30-minute lessons could leave him ready to be driving a tank around a battleground. The simulator must look, feel and react like the real thing. The driver can operate in the head-up or head-down position, with a closed-circuit television system feeding him images of the landscape he's traversing. The hydraulic tripod shakes the training cabin without mercy, like the very worst showground ride. The precise movements of the cabin are determined by a sensor fixed at the base of the optical probe as it moves across the landscape. This feeds information to a computer about the terrain encountered. Tank characteristics and details about its pitch, roll and yaw are integrated so the driver feels an appropriate motion. Both driver and training officer are oblivious to the adjacent room where a rotating camera gantry cruises across a Lilliputian landscape. For them, this is for real. That was quite amazing. The reality of the system is extraordinary. But I think I might prefer to get my thrills at Disneyland. At Conjouet, north of Marseille, a platoon of soldiers from the 5th Cuirassiers is about to go into battle. These tank gunners have travelled from their base at Kaiserslautern in western Germany. But the battleground bears a striking resemblance to the southern Germany they've just left. And the scenario, a force of invading tanks moving across the German landscape, is one they've doubtless had described to them many times. This is the only platoon gunnery simulation unit in the world. 3 turrets, each with a tank commander and gunner combat station, are reproduced down to the smallest detail. In a room adjacent, 3 instructors, each assigned to 1 tank, communicate their orders. The instructor can select one of the available scenarios in a few seconds and modify certain parameters like wind, temperature, altitude and target speed, all of which affect the trajectory of the shot fired. It's nerve-wracking and by intention produces as much of the real stress of combat as possible. So perhaps it's not surprising that these Thomson CSF simulators now cost as much to build as the real thing. Its manufacturers claim simulators are 85% cheaper to run than a tank. There's no doubt the simulation will become even more realistic in the future, with the use of computer-generated images, a system which Thomson calls VISA 4. With this system, the imaging will widen the driver's view to 120 degrees and provide real-time reactions to events, that is, at the rate of 1 image every 30 milliseconds. In this latest generation of simulators, 22 of which will arrive in West Germany this year, it will be impossible to separate the real from the unreal.
Tennis fashions, like just about everything else, have changed dramatically since the game first became popular. Skirts have gone up, and for a moment even disappeared altogether. Racket technology has also come a long way since these old wooden rackets were used. Graphite has replaced aluminium, and as we've reported in previous shows, the science of physics has been applied to find the so-called sweet spot of the tennis racket. But the basic design of tennis rackets has stayed pretty much the same. That is, until now. It might look like it's melted in the sun or been run over by a truck, but the erg racket is the first to be designed ergonomically to adapt to the human anatomy. Invented in Sweden, the banana racket, as it's affectionately known, was designed to ensure that the tennis player's hand, wrist and arm are in the best possible position to minimize injuries such as tennis elbow or wrist strain. Now, with a conventional racket, the wrist is forced downwards, causing strain here. These 2 bends in the erg racket, one here and one here, ensure that the wrist remains straight and neither the muscles nor the tendons are overstretched. And theoretically, this means that power is concentrated much more in a straight line in a forward direction. But with something like this, there's really only one way to find out. Anyone for tennis? The rackets have been produced in both aluminium and graphite, and the Ergai people claim that in either material, the double bend widens what is known as the stable striking axis of the racket, thereby enlarging the sweet spot, that area of maximum power on the racket. The racket is becoming popular with professional tennis players in Sweden, where it originated, and will presumably find a ready market wherever tennis is played. Well, they take a bit of getting used to. You feel a bit silly at first, but after a while they do start to feel reasonably comfortable. The Ergai company in Sweden have already started redesigning squash rackets, table tennis rackets, and even badminton rackets. And who knows, one day all rackets may look like this. I just know that as far as I'm concerned, I think they've given me the one with a hole in it.
Coming up next, saving a doomed temple.
The dawn light has been splashing across the fantastic outlines of this temple for close to 1,000 years. Raja Rajasvara Temple is one of the largest, finest and best preserved temples in all of India. It's a monument to the power and style of the Chola Empire that ruled southern India, Ceylon and parts of Malaysia between 850 and 1270 AD. The giant gateways, or gopuras, are festooned with dancing, writhing deities. They absolutely teem with life. Gods, demons, mortals and animals all crowded in together. The main temple, built to honour the Hindu god Shiva, is enormous. It's built of huge slabs of stone that were carved in situ. A massive single piece of granite makes up the dome of the tower, or Vimana. It weighs in excess of 81 tons and was dragged up an earthwork ramp 6 kilometres long to put it in place. Hindus from all over the country come here to worship, and also for the chance of being blessed by one of the holy elephants that patrols the grounds. The temple was completed in about 6 years, which was a pretty good indication of their ingenuity and skill. And you've got to remember that around about that time, England was just about to be invaded by the Normans, and Europe was very much in the Dark Ages. But here, under the patronage of the Chola kings, art, culture and architecture was at its pinnacle. The Cholas were also master painters, something that remained unknown until the 1940s, when some of their works that adorn these dark, labyrinthine passageways were uncovered by accident. They'd been plastered and painted over by another Tamil dynasty, the Nayaks, around 1550. It's in very good condition for 1,000 years, isn't it? In their enthusiasm to reveal the Chola legacy, the art restorers decided to sacrifice the Nayak works. The Nayaka paintings are quite rich, but they're definitely a broader application than the Chola paintings. They're a little bit like a peasant carpet or a tapestry, and they don't have the same three-dimensional effect as the Cholas. But still, they're 500 years old and of enormous cultural and historical significance. But up until now, it was really King Solomon's choice, because only one of them could be saved. After a considerable period of research, the technique is now available to remove the Nayak works without damaging either. Dr. Subbaraman, my guide, is from the Archaeological Survey of India. He's a mixture of art lover and preserver with the knowledge of an industrial chemist.
But exactly what deity it is, you will know only when the face is also exposed, after detaching the upper half.
To find out more about the Nyack and Chola works, X-rays were taken to fathom what pigments were used. Were they organic or metallic? And a gas chromatograph to find out what glue medium the Nyacks used to stick their paintings to the wall. And two fortuitous things happened. One, it's been discovered that they used metallic oxides, and that's one of the reasons why it hasn't faded away. And also, when the Nyack painters put those few millimetres of plaster over the top, there was just enough shrinkage to form an air gap so that Dr. Subbaraman can get his chisel underneath and thereby save both the Nyack works and the Chola works. One of the most important facets of the procedure of removing the Nyack works is the application of a fine muslin gauze to the Nyack paintings.
And the entire success of the operation depends upon the successful application of the gauze.
Because if there are any air pockets or anything like that, you might lose some of the Nyack level.
That is right.
The Nyack works were unfortunately also inferior in the way they were applied, which makes things even tougher. They were painted fresco secco style, painting onto dried and hardened plaster. The Chola works were painted true fresco, which doesn't occur anywhere else in India. Colours from a rich palette of minerals and precious stones that were painted onto wet lime mortar. And while the Chola works oxidise over the years to limestone and become part of the wall, the Nyack works just get more fragile. Well, this is the big moment, Doctor.
Oh, yes, yes.
The following day, Dr. Subbaraman delicately begins to remove the gauze. As it turns out, the Chola work beneath has been damaged, not by the current intervention, but back prior to 1550. Oh, that's very clear, isn't it?
The right hand of the figure.
But what about this big hole here?
This, unfortunately, is an original damage. And the sad part of it is it has occurred over the face of the figure, which we were hoping to expose fully.
So, is it the monkey god that you were hoping for?
No, it is not the monkey god, you see, because from the portion of the face which is seen, it is a human figure, clearly.
So, for the next 18 months, the crumbling works, held together only by the gauze facings, will make their way into the light of the cloisters on the side of the temple. There, the plaster back will be inspected, filled and filed down before the stiffening process is undertaken. Then, once it's all set, the gauze can be removed and work is started touching up the front of the paintings. The process is all deceptively simple, but it's taken literally centuries to perfect. Once upon a time, so-called expert restorers used to clean up priceless oil paintings with soap and water. So, work is still proceeding over there on another section of the painting, but this is what they look like in their final stage. That fine gauze which held together that soft crumbling front has been removed with a special solvent, and at the back they put polyurethane and epoxy to give it stiffness. And then a fine mist of polyvinyl acetate is painted on, and that protects it from airborne pollution, but it also brings out the sombre colours of the Nyack work. And from here, it'll be painstakingly put together in a mosaic and taken back into the temple where it can be viewed in its natural environment. To the Hindu faithful, the works at this temple are as important as the Sistine Chapel and Michelangelo's Last Judgment. And it's also significant that they've been saved using an indigenous development that's exportable. Dr. Subbaraman and his colleagues have already been working on saving the religious icons of Kampuchea and Afghanistan. And the wonderful thing is that these ancient time capsules have been preserved for future generations to contemplate.
Coming up next, walls that can speak and hear.
Hello. Welcome to Telephone. One moment, please. Welcome to Portia's Pad. Who's Portia? Well, you'll meet her in just a minute. But first, let's find out more about this fabulous $2 million house. This house is not just beautiful, it's functional. Take, for instance, the doors. You don't need keys. You just punch in your key code, and it opens. And that's not all. There's more.
Sharon Nash from Beyond 2000 has arrived.
I've lived my whole life being interested in really loving technology. And to me, when I think about technology, it is very beautiful.
As I told you, this house is the electronic baby of 42-year-old computer whiz Portia. That's Portia, P-O-R-T-I-A. No surname except Ph.D.
One of my goals, a very key goal in building this house, was to create an environment where the technology really wasn't noticed very much, although it was just massive technology, the most that's ever been put in a house, but that it was brought in as a form of art. It was totally consistent with the design and architecture of the house, and that when someone walked in the house, they were just, wow, this is really beautiful. It feels serene. It's kind of Japanese-like. It feels so peaceful. And then as they look around, they finally start noticing the television screens, for example.
Hi there.
Right, players, let's see how you do. Right after this.
It's hard to miss 20 television sets, 13 computers, and 16 telephones. But don't worry, you can't see the 8 miles of wire that connects it all. It's hidden away behind the walls. This is the control tower. It's run by an IBM PC computer. It does a variety of things. With this light pin, you can control the lights, the audio-visual equipment, and the air conditioner. You can also change the volume of the stereo. I think the most interesting feature is the security system. This is a graphic display of the layout of the house. You can see that there's someone walking from this room to this room. It also tells you if someone's opening or closing a window or a door. Someone should come to the door and you're not home, or you just don't want to be disturbed. The house will take a video message.
We are unable to come to the door at this time. If you will face the doorbell light, you may leave a 30-second video message at the sound of the beep. Beep.
Howdy, would y'all like to buy a vacuum cleaner?
There are infrared sensors outside on the grounds, and if they're disturbed, you see it on the monitor. Here you can see someone's pulled into the driveway. If that someone's a burglar, the system will notify you or will call the police if you desire. But if it's not a burglar, but a service person, the house can take care of that, too.
And that's a really convenient feature also for letting service people come in the house at a certain time and not come in the house at any other time. And also allow them to only come into certain areas of the house. For example, the people who deliver the dry cleaning are only allowed to come into the front door closet, and the security system tracks where they are.
There's also a lifeguard script on the computer. A sensor in the pool notifies the house that there's someone in it. The house videotapes all the action, in addition to calling you wherever you are in the house. Or if you happen to be out of town, the house can take care of the situation.
You are not allowed in the pool. Get out.
In this room, you can indulge in any number of audio-visual pleasures. There are 5 TV monitors, cassette recorders, VCRs, and even satellites. But don't worry, you won't have to figure out which one of these to use. All you need is this. House, media room, watch, NBC, TV, please. It's very important that you say please. The house will not perform for just anyone. I had to go through a half-hour courtship, which consisted of me saying 5 or 10 different words to the computer so it recognizes my voice. Right now, it's equipped to handle about 65 words. You have all of these different gadgets where you can pick up the phone and tell the house what to do. Isn't that a little lazy?
Oh, yes, and I love it. Well, to turn off every light, to turn off every television set in this house is a pretty time-consuming activity, and I don't necessarily want to do that when I've gotten out of my bathtub and I'm all relaxed and ready to go to bed.
Oh, yes. Good night, house.
Good night, Sharon.
After the break, art for art's sake.
Most TV cameras are large, bulky affairs. In fact, the Betacam that's taping this at the moment weighs around 6 kilograms. Give us a wave, John. This, however, is the world's smallest television camera. It's the ultra-compact Toshiba CCD camera. It weighs only about ½ an ounce, and it takes astonishingly good pictures. Well, you can see how tiny it is. Obviously, there's no cathode ray tube in there, but a type of semiconductor which converts optical signals to electric signals. It's extremely light, as I said. It only weighs about ½ an ounce. It draws very little power, and it's possible to put it into the most extraordinary situations. Excuse me. Well, I think that's quite enough of the journey around Jeff Watson. It has just 2 controls on it, the aperture here and the focus, which is from 10mm to infinity, which gives you quite a large range. And it's already created a lot of interest from water authorities and people who want to look at things from the inside. Let's just put the camera through this cardboard tube and reveal the flowers at the bottom, and I think you'll see what I mean. The other thing about the camera is it can work in very low light conditions as low as 35 lux. Well, we've got some mice in a rather dark box. Let's put the camera in amongst them and see what that looks like. Well, I think you'd agree that those shots definitely weren't Mickey Mouse. Just retrieve the camera here and hope that we don't release the mice at the same time. Now we might take this little number on the road and see what other sorts of tight corners we can get it into. Well, if you want to buy one of the ultra-compact cameras, you can't just yet because they're not available in Australia, but they will be sometime in the near future. We've had a lot of fun with it and found a lot of unique uses for this little toy. I've just stuck it, in fact, under the engine of the Jag so that I can see what's going on, because after all, when you've got a car as old as this is, you need to know what's about to go wrong with it. See you later.
Just before we go, we thought you'd be interested in seeing this fabulous combination of art and technology. It's called a charged particle beam sculpture, and you can probably see a little bit better when the lights are dimmed. There we are. It's the work of American artist and engineer James Falk. Inside the sealed ball here is an ion plasma in which a continuous electrical charge produces these incredible patterns of miniature lightning. There are 4 basic states of matter in the universe: solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. Now, plasma, which is a glowing, electrically excited gas, is found nowhere on this planet in its natural state except in lightning and in the aurora borealis and the aurora australis at the north and south poles. And yet, it's the most common state of matter in the cosmos. The light from the stars we see at night is glowing, ionized plasma. Now, what James Falk has done here is to permanently seal a complex mixture of rare but harmless gases and chemicals inside the ball to produce what's called touch-responsive art, interactive art. And you can see that when you do touch it, you can create dramatic and beautiful electrical effects and patterns. Quite incredible, really. Now, there's no electrical charge passing through into my hand there, at least none that I can feel, and the device has been designed to meet very exacting American safety standards. If anything, it's an exciting glimpse of some of the new forms of art that we can expect to see in the 21st century. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, an in-depth report on one method of disposing of nuclear waste. Chris gives new meaning to the old expression, flying by the seat of your pants. And Jeff takes the wraps off what motor journalists are hailing as the finest saloon car in the world. Until next time, goodbye from all of us.